Hi, my name is Ariel Holbrook-Smith, and today I'll be discussing PCBs in the Glens Falls, Fort Edwards area of New York. Here we have the table of contents. As you can see, we'll be going over the objectives, discussing the issue via the mapping, discussing the impacts and outcomes, an example from the Hudson River Community Project. We'll talk about PCBs in the fish population of the Hudson River, the General Electric cleanup expenses breakdown, EPA goals for the cleanup in future years, and we'll go over some summarizing points, and finally the reference list. In terms of objectives, through this presentation, we aim to understand the influence of water pollution on surrounding communities, investigate the long-term influences of pollution on communities, assess the work of corporations and governmental bodies to remedy the issue, analyze the effects of PCBs on the ecosystem, and look ahead to environmental goals for the rejuvenation of the Hudson River area. Here, we have a map of the Hudson River as it relates to Glens Falls and Fort Edward. So this map on the right is pulled from the map on the left. It's a section of that map of New York showing the Glens Falls area, the Fort Edwards area, and the Hudson River. So let's talk about PCBs. Polychlorinated biphenyls are a group of 209 different chemicals which share a common structure but vary in the number of attached chlorine atoms. An estimated 1.3 million pounds of different types of PCBs were dumped into the Hudson River by General Electric from 1946 until 1977 when they were banned. This chart shows a number of different health impacts and outcomes that can result from exposure to PCBs. As you can see, it ranges from reproductive and developmental issues all the way to endocrine, hepatic, and possible carcinogenic issues as well. The Hudson River Communities Project was an effort on the part of New York State Department of Health to measure the average PCB levels in the outdoor air and in blood coming from the Hudson River communities. As you can see, there was a study group and a comparison group, and the average PCB level measured was split between groups based on how far people lived, as well as whether they ate fish or did not eat fish. The categories were living within half a mile, living beyond half a mile, living downwind, and living upwind. As you can see, living within half a mile indicated a greater outdoor air PCB level, but a slightly lower blood PCB level. Similarly, you'll find that fish eaters had a higher blood PCB level than non-fish eaters. Here, we have a comparative chart of the PCBs in the Hudson fish in 1975 versus 2007. The difference between these 2 years is the efforts of cleanup on the part of General Electric and the EPA. In 1975, we see considerably higher estimates of PCBs in the Hudson fish, and this graph does also show the minimum estimates and the maximum estimates of PCBs, so there was a range. We can compare the maximums to each other and the minimums to each other, as well as the maximum and minimum of 1975 to the maximum and minimum of 2007, and we can see that there's a drastic difference in the levels of PCBs in the Hudson fish after the interventions had taken place. This pie chart shows the expenses that GE paid to the EPA, as well as other expenses that they made, and it's organized by expense type. As you can see, dredging, so the process of dredging the soil, which was included as part of the Grand Intervention Scheme, was where most of the money did go to. They also paid money in civil penalties and in investigation fees, in floodplaning, agency oversights, but not quite as much as dredging. So this chart represents the EPA's model prediction in 2002, recording the decision made in February 2002 to reduce the PCB levels. So this compares the PCB levels by remedy, and we can see that the expectation is that the PCB levels drop all the way through and beyond 2060. So this was meant to be a long-term project, since it was quite a bit of PCB that was dumped into the Hudson River, and that does take a while to clean up. So these graphs show the projected timeframes for the reductions of PCB levels in fish based on a range of remedial options from no action to a major dredging project. All options reduce PCB levels in fish, and so we can see the overall decrease in all lines on the graph. So in sum, polychlorinated biphenyls are associated with a myriad of poor health outcomes. The pollution of the Hudson River by General Electric contributed to decades of adverse health impacts that we continue to see today. Unregulated corporate waste dumping has severe environmental consequences, and organizations should be held accountable for their impact on the environment. Efforts to clean up the Hudson River have been somewhat successful, but there is still work to be done, as we saw in the previous slide, that it is an ongoing process. And here's the final references page. Thank you for tuning into this presentation.